Happy Halloween, guys. As Rakim would say, or Tony D would say, I have gone back to the lab, my underground basement laboratory here, to find some more spooky, horrorcore, Halloween-appropriate records to talk about this Halloween. As you know, every year I talk about horrorcore records or something spooky, Houdini's Haunted House, Lovebug Starsky's Amityville, Ghetto Boys, Esham, something like that. And this year, I'm out. Sorry, guys. Just kidding. Obviously, my well is deep, my dead pit is deep, and this year we're going to take it back, a pretty old school one, all the way back to 1983. Boom, we're going to talk about Frankenstein. Not the Canadian rapper Frankenstein, but Frankenstein the Song by Edgar Winter on Body Rock / Tommy Boy Records. Body Rock was sort of more the hip-hop wing of Tommy Boy. I mean, Tommy Boy was already a hip-hop somewhat label, but Body Rock even a little bit more so. Tommy Boy was, as opposed to other hip-hop labels, even like Sugar Hill or something, they were more dance-oriented, more experimental-oriented, more, creative freestyle, as in the 80s freestyle dance music kind of freestyle, not MCs freestyling off the top of their head freestyle. And this record is sort of no exception. They were putting out stuff like Pac Jam, they were putting out stuff like the Malcolm X record, where it's just Malcolm X samples over a hip-hop beat and stuff like that. They put out Rap and Duke. You never really knew what they were going to do. Body Rock, again, a little bit more straight hip-hop. They had stuff like Tony D, they had GLOBE and DJ Wiz, one of his records, and one of his other records was on straight Tommy Boy. Of course, Tommy Boy had Africa Bambaataa back in those days, and they had Frankenstein by Edgar Winter. Edgar Winter is a real, established, legit artist in other genres than hip-hop. He's a total rock guy. I don't know much about rock, but he definitely was huge in the 70s. Edgar Winter had the Edgar Winter Group. They had some really big albums in the early 70s. Again, not my kind of thing, but one of their biggest hit records, in fact, probably their biggest period, was a record called Frankenstein. But not this one. Again, this is 1983. Now, Frankenstein, again, a big #1 hit single, but is totally instrumental, which is kind of unique for sort of more pop rock kind of stuff. Not that I would say Edgar Winter was pop. He's definitely more sort of on the artsy side maybe of rock, but big #1 hits. So, I mean, we're not talking about, emo, obscure kind of stuff. But anyway, Frankenstein was a purely instrumental track. And when it was originally performed live and stuff, it wasn't even called Frankenstein. And originally, no connection whatsoever to good old Frankie here, or his monster. Instead, Frankenstein is just called Frankenstein because it was a long instrumental track, which they patched up, they cut it down and re-edited it, so it's all sort of little pieces of the song strung together to make one new, more cohesive song for the final record, which came out in 1972, I want to say. And so it was patched up like Frankenstein's monster. That's the idea there. It was really originally sort of called, unofficially the double drum song because they had two drummers. Edgar Winter played lots of instruments and drums with one of them, so he has a big drum solo, while another drummer in the Edgar Winter group also has a drum solo at the same time, so it's kind of known as a double drum song. But that was an unofficial title, and when it finally did come out, again in the 70s, it was known as Frankenstein because it was all patched together. So, how do we get from that to, over 10 years later, to this? Well, actually, the A-side here is just pretty straightforward. It is just the Frankenstein song, basically all the classic riffs and instrumentation, redone by Edgar Winter himself. This is not like some DJ just sort of took his record or something. And gave him credit. This is actually by Edgar Winter. He made this record. And turned into, given a hip-hop beat, basically. So a few of the elements are a little bit more electronicized as opposed to classical, guitar and live drums, and it's putting over a hip-hop beat, and that's basically just the idea. This is the 80s dance version of Frankenstein, and he's just going to kind of sell it off cheap as another dance record. Tommy Boy, again, just sort of the perfect label for that sort of thing, and that's all it is. But why do I now have it here as a cool, creepy, atmospheric, hip-hop, old-school, horrorcore record for Halloween? Not just because it's arbitrarily titled Frankenstein. It's because there's a couple versions on this 12-inch. You got the long, extended version, you got the instrumental, and then finally you have a rap version on the B-side. This was, I'm sure, meant to be sort of a very obscure, forgettable track, just thrown on almost for laughs on the B-side, but here it is, a rap version of Frankenstein. By, yes, Edgar Winter himself, as in, this guy, you can look at his picture here, that guy does the raps, and the raps are all about Frankenstein, as in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, as in the evil doctor and his monster, and, just a crazy, very upbeat, it's all about being a mad scientist. It's very almost sort of Monster Mashy, if there were no other monsters except Frankenstein. So it's a very upbeat, very silly, as you can imagine, a light, pop-hearted, fun record. But also, let's look at it, one of the earliest examples of horrorcore at all in the genre. I mean, again, I've talked about this in previous years, what you define horrorcore as. Does it have to be serious? Does it have to be, like the Flatliners? Could something like Michael Jackson's Thriller be considered horrorcore because they have Vincent Price Rasmus on the hook? I would kind of say yes, it's probably the earliest horrorcore and certainly inspired lots of stuff like Haunted House of Rock, etc., etc. But, your definition, your mileage of horrorcore will vary. Certainly horrorcore, the term and the genre, didn't really blow up until the early 90s. But if we're including things like early Ghetto Boys, Esham, and if you're not including Esham, then you're really just going, I think, by the letter of when the genre got its name. So I think you gotta include all this stuff as horrorcore, and certainly, even if you don't, it's still a great Halloween-themed hip-hop song. So let's listen to it now. Again, crazy, fun, upbeat Frankenstein rhymes. A pretty solid instrumental because it is based largely on a very successful instrumental rock record, so a lot of great instrumentation in here, again, set to sort of a very 80s kind of freestyle-y and, sort of Africa Bambaataa stylish hip-hop beat. And then we're going to come back, because there's more. Alright, so that was Edgar Winter's Frankenstein rap. But as you see, I'm holding another record. What is this right here? Frankenstein 1994. Credit in the writing to E. Winter, so absolutely Edgar Winter. But this is by Dr. X and the Lab Girls. And this is, as you would guess from the title, a more modern, 10 years later roughly, 1994 from 83, updated version of Edgar Winter's Frankenstein, the rap version. So again, you got a couple versions on here. This is a lot more sort of, I don't even really quite know what you would call it, sort of acid jazz, techno-y kind of dance stuff. And again, not all the versions necessarily use the rap version. It's just sort of more updated dance version of what was already an updated dance version of the Edgar Winter Group's Frankenstein from 1972. But there is absolutely a version on here that uses the Frankenstein rap from the 1983 version. And so I'm going to play you one version, sort of the most hip-hop version there is. It's kind of cool, it's kind of fun, it's definitely not a great record, but all this is just sort of fun novelty stuff. And it does feature the original Frankenstein raps, and again, updated for the 90s, which is still not so updated considering we're in 2014. Maybe they'll do another version. They've already missed a decade, they can't do the 2000s, but maybe somebody will do the 2010s. But anyway, this is 1994, Dr. X and the Lab Girls, Frankenstein, 1994.
In a laboratory once upon a time, at work was a doctor named Frankenstein. All by name and put by name, he created a freak of society. From scratch he built him limb by limb, and then he named his creation right after him. He gave it a bang, even a howl. People said he was insane, but he had to be smart. I was supposed to see what the future would be when he was dealing with that unknown technology. Now the creature was a circle and his body was whole, but he had yet to achieve his ultimate goal. The viral stick which he did contrive to use electrical energy to bring it alive. Frankenstein was overcharged with the strength of his hand. A million megavolts more than he should have been. The body had too much juice. Look out, Frankenstein is loose. What's that? You say the body has too much juice. You better look out, Frank is loose. Frankenstein got strong. The doctor tried to teach him right from wrong. Every day of his life was a new experience, and he continued to amaze the young scientists. Day by day, hour by hour by hour, the doctor tried to control his power. The reason that the creature could not be tamed was that the brain he obtained was criminally insane. People up and down called Frankenstein a terror. Even the doctor considered him an error. He was a victim of the creature shock of overkill. But to destroy his creation was beyond his will. Now he's having too much juice. Look out, Frankenstein is loose. What's that? You say the body has too much juice. You better look out, Frank is loose.
And I'm back. A quick little bonus for you guys on Halloween. Here's a record actually it's a CD, but it's one I ordinarily wouldn't highlight, I wouldn't make a video about. It's not that great, it's not that important, but just as a fun little tag-along bonus to Edgar Winter's Frankenstein Halloween video, let's look at one more Frankenstein rap, a really obscure one, by Elvira herself, the original. Now, this is a full album, and it's a compilation album, which means it's just a whole bunch of previously released songs thrown together on this album. This is the kind of thing that gets released and re-released. I think it's on Rhino Records. Yes, it is. It's on Rhino Records. It comes out every Halloween. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, now it's pretty old. It's like 20 years old. But I still wouldn't be surprised if you went to, like, your local Walgreens or something right around Halloween if they had this in the CD bin or something. It's that kind of album. And it's all, again, it's pre-existing songs. It's stuff like, it's not even necessarily hip-hop songs. It's stuff like the Monster Mash, the original Monster Mash. But there is some rap on here, too, like DJ Jazzy Jeff's Nightmare on My Street. So it's that kind of CD. Just Halloween monster-themed songs all thrown together, hosted here by Elvira. But what makes the CD unique is that Elvira has two original songs of her own, which she performs on the CD as well. And of course, Elvira is not known as a musician. She's known as a film host, and even sort of starring in her own star vehicle once, I think in the late 80s. But here she is performing as a musical artist, two songs, one in particular, Here Comes the Bride of Frankenstein, where she raps. She doesn't always rap, but she raps on this one, and she raps all about Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein, James Whale's classic films, turned into a very cheesy, as you would imagine, Elvira rapped song for Halloween for a compilation album. So, you know, you can easily track this down. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if you could still pick this up in a Walgreens or something now for, you know, their Halloween display. But if not, you can track it down online, super cheap and easy. Certainly not an important masterpiece or a great record or anything along those lines. But again, fun just for Halloween. So I'm going to end with a clip of this. Here Comes the Bride of Frankenstein by Elvira on the album Monster Hits.